What if the respect you crave from others is the very thing you are forbidden from pursuing directly? What if the relentless chase for validation, for a good name, for a seat at the table, is a rigged game you are designed to lose? The ancient Stoics understood a profound truth about human nature, that the moment you make another person's opinion your primary objective, you hand them the keys to your own inner peace. Yet, they also knew that a life of deep and abiding respect was not only possible, but was the natural consequence of a well-ordered mind. By the end of our time together today, you will understand not just the common habits that quietly corrode the respect people have for you, but the fundamental internal architecture from which those habits arise. More importantly, you will hold the blueprint for rebuilding that architecture on a foundation of unshakable self-possession. We will uncover the one internal compass that, when calibrated correctly, makes the respect of others a welcome but non-essential byproduct of a life well lived. Before we descend into the forge of self-examination, a necessary word of caution. The philosophy we explore here is a framework for reflection, a set of tools for building personal character honed over millennia. It is not, and should not be seen as, a substitute for professional medical, psychological, or legal advice. It is a mirror for introspection, not a prescription for any specific life circumstance. The path of self-knowledge is a personal one. Use these ideas as a guide, but always navigate by the light of your own reason and, when necessary, with the help of qualified professionals. Our journey begins not with a list of forbidden actions, but with a foundational principle that governs all human experience. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, most things are not. Up to us are our judgments, our intentions, our choices, our actions, the workings of our own mind. Not up to us are our bodies, our reputations, our wealth, the actions of others, and the vast unfolding tapestry of fate. The modern world teaches us to obsess over the second category. It trains us to be anxious gardeners in our neighbor's yard, while our own lies fallow, overrun with weeds. The slow, almost imperceptible erosion of respect begins the moment we neglect our own garden. It is a death by 1,000 small surrenders of our own agency. The habits we will dissect are not merely behavioral tics, they are external symptoms of an internal disorder. They are the cracks that appear on the surface when the foundation of the soul is unsound. Let us first examine the most common and corrosive of these symptoms, the habit of excessive complaint. We all know this energy. It is the ambient hum of modern life, the sigh about the traffic, the grumble about a demanding boss, the lament over the weather. It presents itself as a form of release, a harmless venting of pressure, but it is a lie. Complaining is not a release valve, it is a leak in the hull of your ship. With every complaint, you are not releasing pressure, you are losing precious buoyancy. You are bleeding out the very energy required to navigate the waters you find yourself in. Why is this so destructive to the respect of others? Because on a primal, intuitive level, people are drawn to agency, not to victimhood. A person who habitually complains communicates a simple, devastating message. I am powerless. I am at the mercy of my circumstances. The world happens times to times me. Whether they are conscious of it or not, listeners begin to see you as a liability, an energy sink. They may offer sympathy, they may nod along, but they will not entrust you with responsibility. They will not seek your counsel in a crisis. They will not see you as a pillar of strength because you have defined yourself as a passive object buffeted by external forces. I recall a period in my own life, years ago, when I believed my critical eye was a sign of intelligence. I saw flaws everywhere in systems, in people, in plans, and I was never shy about pointing them out. I mistook my cynicism for sophisticated realism. I would sit in meetings, and my contributions were often a litany of what could go wrong, a detailed map of all potential failures. I thought I was adding value by being the resident devil's advocate. One day, after a particularly draining project post-mortem, a senior colleague, a quiet woman of immense competence, asked to walk with me. She listened patiently as I continued to lament the project's shortcomings. Then she stopped and looked at me directly, not with anger, but with a kind of diagnostic clarity. "Do you realize," she said, "that in the last hour you have used your considerable intellect to describe the cage, but have not once mentioned a key? You talk as though problems are your destiny, not your assignment." Those words were a bucket of ice water. She was right. I had become a connoisseur of complaints, a collector of grievances. My identity had become entangled with the role of the insightful victim. The hard lesson was this: complaining is a surrender of your power to frame reality. The Stoic does not deny the existence of hardship. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor who dealt with plague, war, and betrayal, did not pretend the world was a garden of delights. But he understood that the event itself is one thing, our judgment about the event is another entirely. The rain will not stop because you curse it. The traffic will not part because you pound your fist on the steering wheel. These are externals, indifferent to your emotional state. The only thing you control is your response. The antidote to complaint is not a blind, foolish optimism. It is a disciplined, surgical focus on your own agency. When faced with an undesirable situation, the Stoic asks a simple question: is this within my control? If the answer is yes, then complaining is an indulgent waste of time. The only rational response is action. Fix the process, have the difficult conversation, build the better system. If the answer is no, then complaining is not only useless, it is a form of self-harm. The only rational response is acceptance, not a weak-willed resignation, but a serene, powerful acknowledgement of reality as it is. This frees your energy to be deployed where it actually matters within the sphere of your own choices. When you replace the habit of complaining with the discipline of action or acceptance, you begin to radiate a quiet competence. People feel it. They may not know what has changed, but they sense they are in the presence of someone who steers their own ship, rather than someone who is merely a passenger lamenting the storm. Closely related to complaining is its ugly cousin, gossip. If complaining is the act of poisoning your own well, gossip is the act of drawing from that poisoned well and offering it to others. It masquerades as social bonding, as the sharing of information, as a harmless way to pass the time. But it is a deeply corrosive force. When you engage in gossip, you are trafficking in the currency of other people's lives, a currency you have no right to spend. You send an unmistakable signal: I am not a secure vessel for information. My loyalty is conditional. I derive a fleeting sense of importance from the private affairs of others. The person who gossips times you is making a mental note that you will one day gossip times about times them. Trust, the bedrock of all meaningful relationships, professional and personal, becomes impossible to build on such shifting sands. The ancient Stoics valued a concept they called times eulobeia, times a kind of cautious discretion. It meant guarding one's speech, speaking only what was necessary and true and helpful. They understood that words have weight and consequence. To speak carelessly about another person's struggles, choices, or private life is to demonstrate a profound lack of character. Think of it in architectural terms. Every time you refuse to pass on a piece of salacious gossip, every time you steer a conversation away from tearing someone down and toward constructive ideas, you are laying another solid stone in the foundation of your reputation. Every time you indulge, you are mixing sand into the mortar. For a while, the structure may still stand, but under the slightest pressure, it will crumble. The person of integrity, the person who commands deep and lasting respect, is a fortress. Secrets are safe within their walls. Their word is a vault. In a world awash with careless talk, the one who practices disciplined silence becomes a rare and valuable sanctuary. Their presence is calming because you know you are safe with them. This is not about being cold or aloof. It is about understanding that true connection is built on a foundation of trust, not on the cheap thrill of shared secrets. Choose to discuss ideas, not people. Choose to build up, not to tear down. This simple daily choice is one of the most powerful ways to distinguish yourself as a person of substance. Now we turn from the domain of speech to the domain of action, where a second pair of habits works to dismantle respect, unreliability, and the constant interruption of others. These are two sides of the same debased coin, a failure to honor commitments, both large and small. Let us start with unreliability. We live in an age of casual commitments. I'll be there, we text, with little intention of following through. I'll get that to you by Friday, we promise, knowing full well it will be the following week. We treat our word as a placeholder, a flexible expression of intent rather than a sacred bond. Each time you make a promise and break it, no matter how small, you chip away at the value of your own word. Eventually, your words become weightless, floating away without impact, and you, the speaker of those words, lose your gravity in the eyes of others. I once worked with a man we can call Alex. He was, by all accounts, a genius in his field. His technical skills were breathtaking. He could solve problems that left others completely stumped. On paper, he was the most valuable player on any team. But Alex was profoundly unreliable. He would promise a report and deliver it 3 days late, filled with brilliant insights, but useless for the meeting that had already passed. He would agree to mentor a junior colleague, but cancel their sessions at the last minute for something more interesting. He saw these as small, isolated incidents, forgivable quirks of a brilliant mind. He failed to see the pattern he was weaving. Over time, something insidious happened. People stopped relying on him. They stopped including him in critical, time-sensitive projects. They would consult him for his brilliant ideas, but they would give the responsibility for executing those ideas to someone else, someone perhaps less brilliant, but infinitely more dependable. Alex's career stalled. He grew bitter, believing he was being overlooked, a victim of office politics. He couldn't see that he himself had authored his own irrelevance. He had trained everyone around him to believe that his word was meaningless. His talent promised value, but his character failed to deliver it. This is a crucial lesson. The world may be initially impressed by your talent, but it will ultimately reward your character. Reliability is the bedrock of that character. It is the simple, powerful act of doing what you said you would do. The Stoics saw this not as a matter of social etiquette, but as a core component of virtue. To a Stoic, your word is an extension of your will. When you give your word, you are making a commitment based on your reasoned judgment. To break it lightly is to demonstrate that your own will is disordered, that you are governed by passing whims and distractions rather than by a coherent inner purpose. Building a reputation for reliability is not about grand, heroic gestures. It is built in the mundane, in the everyday. It is showing up on time. It is answering the email. It is meeting the deadline. It is being honest about your capacity and saying no with respect when you cannot commit, rather than saying yes with deceit. People do not expect perfection. They expect integrity, and integrity is simply the alignment of your words and your actions, repeated over and over until it becomes your nature. If unreliability is the failure to honor commitments over time, interrupting others is the failure to honor the commitment of the present moment. It seems like a minor transgression, a sign of enthusiasm or a fast-paced mind, but its effect is profoundly disrespectful. When you interrupt someone, you are, in that moment, communicating a series of powerful, negative messages. What I have to say is more important than what you are saying. My train of thought is more valuable than yours. I am not listening to understand. I am merely waiting for a space to inject my own voice. This habit often stems from insecurity and ego. We are so anxious to prove our worth, to demonstrate our intelligence, to add our 2 cents, that we trample over the speaker to do so. We are not truly engaged in a dialogue. We are engaged in a series of competing monologues. This was the core of my own delayed awakening. My manager's observation that I was always ready to speak but rarely ready to listen was not just a critique of my meeting etiquette. It was a diagnosis of my internal state. I was operating from a place of ego disguised as passion. My focus was on my own performance, not on the collective search for truth or the simple act of showing respect to another human being. The Stoic practice of listening is an act of profound discipline. Epictetus, a man who began life as a slave and rose to become one of the most influential thinkers of the Roman Empire, taught that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen twice as much as we speak. This is not a call for passive silence. It is a call for active, intentional listening. It is the practice of holding your own ego in check, of quieting your inner monologue, and truly receiving what the other person is trying to convey. It is to listen not just to their words, but to the meaning and feeling behind them. When you feel that familiar urge to jump in, to correct, to add your point, try this small Stoic exercise. Take a silent, deep breath. Ask yourself, does this need to be said? And does it need to be said times by me, asterisk? And does it need to be said times right now, asterisk? More often than not, the answer is no. By simply waiting, by allowing the other person to complete their thought, you accomplish several things. You gain a more complete understanding of their position. You show them the profound respect of your undivided attention, and you create a space where better, more thoughtful ideas can emerge. You begin to be seen not as the loudest voice in the room, but as the wisest. True strength does not need to announce itself. It is felt in its calm, steady presence. Learning to listen, truly listen, is one of the most powerful and underrated ways to build that presence and command a deep, earned respect. We have now examined these 4 habits: complaining, gossiping, unreliability, and interrupting. But it is not enough to simply identify the weeds. We must understand the soil from which they grow, and we must learn the art of cultivating a different kind of garden altogether. This is where we meet the story of transformation. Consider a manager. We will call her Maria. For years, she ran her department through a lens of frustration. She complained about her team's lack of initiative. She would occasionally share her frustrations about one team member with another, creating subtle currents of mistrust. She was chronically overcommitted, promising resources she didn't have, and timelines her team couldn't meet, leading to a constant state of firefighting and burnout. In meetings, she would dominate the conversation, her anxiety to solve every problem leading her to cut people off before they could fully articulate their thoughts. Her team was competent, but morale was low, and respect for her leadership was purely positional. They did what she said because she was the boss, not because they were inspired by her. One day, facing the potential loss of 2 of her best people, Maria had a moment of brutal honesty with herself. She realized she was the common denominator in her team's dysfunction. She had been trying to demand respect and performance, but she had not been embodying the qualities that would naturally elicit them. She decided to experiment with a different approach, one rooted in the principles we have been discussing. She made a quiet, personal commitment to stop complaining. When a problem arose, instead of venting her frustration, she would call the relevant people into a room and frame the situation neutrally. Here is the reality we are facing. Here are our resources. What is our first move? She shifted the energy from blame to action. She instituted a strict no-gossip policy with herself. If she had an issue with someone, she addressed it with them directly, respectfully, and in private. If others came to her to complain about a colleague, she would gently redirect them. That sounds like important feedback. Have you shared it with them directly? She was rerouting the toxic currents into clean, productive channels. Her biggest change was in her commitments. She began to under-promise and over-deliver. She learned to say, "Let me check our capacity and get back to you," instead of an impulsive yes. When she gave a deadline, she treated it as sacred. Her team, initially skeptical, began to see that her word was now gold. Trust began to form, not as an abstract ideal, but as a lived reality. Finally, in meetings, she began to practice Stoic listening. She would speak last. She saw her role not as the primary problem solver, but as the facilitator of the team's collective intelligence. She would listen, synthesize, and only then offer her perspective. The transformation was not instantaneous. It was a slow, deliberate process of laying one good brick at a time. But over the course of a year, the culture of her team was unrecognizable. Productivity and innovation soared. More importantly, the atmosphere changed from one of anxious tension to one of mutual respect. Maria had stopped times managing times her team and had started times leading times them, primarily by leading herself. She didn't demand respect. She became respectable. Her authority was no longer derived from her title on the organizational chart, but from the integrity of her character. This brings us back to the question we started with, and the open loop I promised to close. The relentless pursuit of external respect is a fool's errand because it is outside of your control. The one internal compass that, when calibrated correctly, makes respect a natural byproduct is what the Stoics called times proheresis asterisk. This is a difficult word to translate, but it means, in essence, our faculty of reasoned choice. It is the part of you that observes the world, forms judgments, and decides how to act. It is your command center, the inner citadel. The only thing in the entire universe that is truly yours is the quality of your own choices. You do not control the outcome, but you have absolute sovereignty over your intention. You cannot control whether someone likes you, but you can control whether you are a person of integrity. You cannot control whether someone trusts you, but you can control whether you are trustworthy. The 4 habits that destroy respect are all failures of this faculty. Complaining and gossiping are the result of choosing to assent to negative, unhelpful judgments about the world and other people. Unreliability and interrupting are the result of choosing to prioritize your momentary whims and ego over your commitments and your respect for others. To build a life of genuine respect, therefore, is to dedicate yourself to the relentless training of your times proheresis asterisk. It is to bring the mirror of self-observation to your daily life and ask, at every turn, is this choice in alignment with the kind of person I wish to be? Am I acting from a place of reason, discipline, and goodwill? Stop chasing the shadow of reputation and start building the substance of character. Use the discipline of your tongue, refusing to pollute the air with complaint or gossip. Use the integrity of your word, making your commitments few, clear, and unbreakable. Use the stillness of a mind that truly listens, offering others the gift of your full presence. Do this not to win the approval of others, but because it is the right way for a rational human being to live. Do this to earn your own self-respect. When you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and know that you have acted with integrity, that you have been the architect of your own character rather than a product of your circumstances, you will have found a source of validation that no one can ever take from you. The respect of others, when it comes, will simply be a pleasant echo of the respect you have already granted yourself. Now that we have fortified the inner citadel by examining the habits that weaken its walls, the next logical step is to train our perception itself. It is not enough to control our speech and actions. We must learn to see the world not as our immediate, emotional reactions tell us it is, but as it truly is, a mixture of the indifferent and the within our power. This is the art of separating events from our judgments about them, a practice the Stoics considered the very key to tranquility, and it begins with a powerful technique known as negative visualization, the conscious rehearsal of loss, not to create anxiety, but to cultivate a profound and resilient gratitude for the present moment. That, however, is a discipline for another day. For now, remember this: you are the only one responsible for the energy you bring into the world. Bring what builds and leave the rest behind.